Let's go, Angie. You ready to get your pump on?
I'm ready. I'm Sergeant Angie Tetley.
And I'm Constable Brennan Martin.
Usually, you'll find us at recruiting events for the Calgary Police Service.
Like Run with a Recruiter, 49.
Between the two of us, we have over 40 years policing experience.
Over the course of both of our careers, we've met so many amazing coppers.
We want to share their experiences, learn from their challenges and difficult moments, and of course, celebrate their successes.
We're going to hear about real calls and investigations and the impact that they've had on the community and our members. We're also going to explore what led them to policing and get some behind-the-scenes information on the sometimes hilarious and sometimes heartbreaking and traumatic stories that happen every day in our amazing city.
Please join us while we find out why members of the Calgary Police Service have been called to serve.
Woo! I'm fired up. Let's get this going. What did you just say to me?
I may have called you an idiot on screen.
I am's what I ams, I is what I is. Staff Sergeant Travis Juska, otherwise known as Captain America. That's actually an old name, but that's a US sort of superhero. Everybody knows you as the superhero, myself included. So going forward, you are Captain Canada. Okay. And we're super thankful to have you here today. Me personally, I get to be around two Canada athletes. We got Captain Canada on one side, literally looks like and acts like a superhero. And over here, we got Canada's best all day, every day. Thanks a lot.
So lucky.
Before we get going, Angie and I are actually going to take turns going over your basic introduction. You've done a lot of amazing things. We're not even going to come close to nailing it. But know that this comes from a place of love and appreciation, and we're excited to share you and your story. So currently assigned, deployed in 5 districts.
That's right.
You have received some or more than the following. The Sovereign's Medal for Volunteering, that doesn't surprise me at all. Diamond Jubilee Medal, Platinum Jubilee Medal, Alberta Emergency Services Medal, Calgary Police Distinguished Service Medal, and in addition to that, you have 2 Chiefs Awards and a team citation. I really honestly feel like we're gonna have to create some more real estate on your chest for all these medals.
Well, that doesn't even come close, because there's a few other things that we need to talk
boss,
about.
go ahead.
Just the volunteerism that you have outside of this job is kind of outstanding. Over 12,000 hours.
Thank you.
Just coaching youth sports. And like both of us coach sports as
no
well.
Hockey.
We get it. We understand how much time and effort that takes. So the contributions to the community are outstanding. You've been part of other groups like Power Play, the Law Enforcement Torch Run, Special Olympics, Big Brothers and Sisters. You continue to volunteer at Mount Royal University for the Harry G. Schaefer Mentorship Program that pairs a serving police officer with students there. And you've also, which I just learned today, are kind of an artist. Yeah. And the fact that you created a coloring book to help bridge the gap between diverse communities and the police. We have these coloring books in our storage room upstairs right now. And so just knowing that you actually drew those pictures just makes it that much more awesome. We have the Filipino version, I think, upstairs, which is like so incredible. I had no idea that you were part of that. Creating the logo and artwork for the CPSTP and all of the work that you've done with the Indigenous community, helping indigenize just the CPS graduation ceremonies, right, by having the Indigenous police uniform, using eagle feathers. The list kind of goes on and on. That is a very brief summary, but it's really impressive what you do sort of on the side and on your own time. So we're very, very grateful that you're here today and to share your story.
Thank you.
Let's get right into it. Let's talk about what you were like as a kid and where you grew up and how you sort of came into policing.
I was born in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and immediately moved to Brooks, Alberta, where I grew up on a small acreage outside of town. And I was as socially awkward and geared towards athletics as I was as a child.
As you currently are.
As I am now, yeah,
okay.
Perfect. So, I grew up the youngest of 3 siblings. I have a brother and sister who are 17 months older and who are twins. And spent really most of my life kind of chasing them and trying to be as big as them, as mature as them, as strong as them, as successful as them, and came to Calgary after I graduated high school and took a Bachelor of Applied Justice Studies degree at Mount Royal, which eventually led to me landing myself here.
So we talked earlier when we met before about your desire to be a police officer and how that has sort of been always a part of you. Like you talked about what you were like as a little kid, about like Halloween costumes and stuff like that. So Tell us a little bit about like that intrinsic motivation from a child to become a police officer and why that has always been that way.
Yeah, and in addition to some other costumes I sported as a child, a very cute mouse costume when I was 4. I think I went as a dinosaur when I was 10, but there always seemed to be...
Did it have cut-off sleeves?
It did not.
All right.
No. From a very young age, I felt a call to serve. I felt a call, a very deep-rooted call to give back to community, to protect other people. And so whether it was going as a police officer for Halloween or borrowing a military uniform from a friend that had come from Lithuania, which is actually where my heritage is from, and wearing that, I was always very interested in emergency services and the military. And I was 11 years old coming back from a hunting trip with my dad. And I said, you know, I'm going to be a police officer or I'm going to go in the Army. And he said, I don't really want you to go in the Army. And I was like, fine, I'll be a police officer. And that was the end of it. And I think if you really kind of went back in time, it would have been even sooner than that I had solidified some kind of career to service in my mind. But it was from that point forward that was my singular focus.
That's so cool, like right from a kid.
So you did that, you had that mindset going forward. Did you plan on doing some post-secondary? What was your plan after high school?
My plan after high school was to be as prepared for the application process as I could, and that meant proving life experience, that meant proving volunteer experience, and that meant getting some post-secondary education because, of course, wanting to get hired as soon as possible meant entering the police service at a very young age, and in order to do that, you had to prove to the selection process that you were prepared, mature, and respectful. And so I went to Mount Royal College back then, which is dating myself, to take the Bachelor of Applied Justice Studies degree. And Mount Royal was a natural fit. My brother and sister had both gone there, my brother to take business, my sister into nursing. And that really gave me an opportunity to not only build some post-secondary experience, but to get out of small town Brooks, Alberta life and kind of expand into the bigger city and gain that necessary experience. The applied degree has 2 work terms built within the 4 years. So I did one at Medicine Hat Hospital on 5 North, which is one of the units that focuses on psychiatric care as a security guard. And then I got my first real taste of policing as a special constable with the RCMP back in Brooks. So I got to go back to my hometown.
What did that feel like to put on a uniform?
It was really exciting. Yeah, it certainly was a step up from the Garda uniform that I put on at the Medicine Hat Hospital. And so I showed up on day one as a summer student or an auxiliary. You don't wear, you wear a blue stripe, and you're supposed to wear this gaudy kind of shoulder sleeve that looks like, it says student in big letters, it looks bright blue to notify people. And I walked in on day one to the detachment, and my partner, who would be my partner through the 5 months we'd worked together, looked at me and was like, wow, you can ditch that right now. He's like, we don't need people knowing that you're a student. We're short on personnel at the detachment, so the more cops it looks like we have, the better. Give me that blue hat, you don't need that. Here's a yellow hat, here's your police jacket, let's get out there, champ. So
nice.
Yeah.
So one thing I was wondering, because we talked to a variety of different people, both on set and off set, and the people that are called to serve, often we wonder, is the situation for you at that time, was it Calgary Police or bust, or what was your perspective on employment with policing?
I was interested in policing first and foremost, but I had, in speaking with some of my colleagues in the RCMP who had moved across the country, who are away from family, who were experiencing different parts of the world, which was exciting, but also challenging because they're away from what they really knew. So Southern Alberta, which is where I have a lot of affiliation, a lot of friends, a lot of family, I knew I wanted to still try and be close to that. And so that, in conjunction with everything I had learned about what the Calgary Police was doing in relation to relationships with the community and supporting volunteerism and building trust and confidence and all those different things, that led me to believe that Calgary was my number one choice. But in the same token, I'll be honest, if they had deferred me for any reason, I would have shotgun approached my applications across the country. I was first and foremost into policing, but then a very close second was trying to be with the Calgary Police.
You know what? I was very similar to you. When I applied, I really wanted to be CPS friends, family. I love the city. There's a few advantages to being a police officer in the city of Calgary. But like you, the end goal was to serve. The end goal was to be a police officer. So I think that's awesome. Explain or describe to us your application process.
I have no police officers in my family. I do not come from a policing background. I've ironically married into a police family, but and so when I entered the process, I had very little knowledge of what to expect. And thankfully, my girlfriend at the time, her roommate in college was Mike Hagan's daughter.
Oh, wow.
And so Mike kindly took me under his wing, knowing that policing was an interest of mine, and helped walk me through that process. So back then it was still the pair, right?
Yep.
So
Did you do it backwards on your hands?
I
Smoking a cig.
I did not do it backwards. You know what's a really interesting story though is I showed up to run the pair at the old Andrew Davidson building in the driest environment known to man in that secondary sub-basement.
Blood, you taste blood, yeah.
Yeah, and I was last to go, like very last of all the applicants. And so I was watching people go, and while I was confident in my fitness, it doesn't detract from being nervous because this is something you really want to achieve. And so I was continually sipping water. But of course, 1,000 sips of water, and then like I'd run out of water and be like, oh, I'm nervous and thirsty, and so I'd go fill out my water. And so I drank liters of water watching all of these people go, and I don't think I have ever felt so sick after running the pair than I did so waterlogged. I took my first step, and it's a miracle that you couldn't hear me slosh as I ran across the obstacle course.
So one thing that a lot of people don't know, the difference between the pair and the A-Prep, which is the current standard, there's an obstacle course very similar to the pair, but at the end of that, you get a 10-minute break, and of course, you get to do the léger. Yeah. And I have watched you do the léger, and the people out there don't know it. The regular léger gets bored with you and runs out of audio. And so I do remember a few times, you and actually Inspector Bell, you would bring out a bench. And so instead of just running back and forth and, soaking up the suck, one, you're smiling. Two, you're doing hurdles over top of multiple benches. And then on a different situation, I saw you guys doing burpees at the end of each part of the gym. That's impressive.
So speaking of your athletic abilities, when you were in classes, you did win multiple awards to add on to to the resume at the beginning. One, of course, was the David Hansen Award for Fitness. But you also won the Jim DeWitt Award for Firearms with your hunting background. I assume that came in handy as well.
Firearms were very familiar to me growing up in small town Alberta, yeah.
For sure. And then also the Rob Vanderweel Award, which is the Class Choice Award. So obviously classes was extremely successful for you and you enjoyed them. And then, so any specific memories or anything about classes that stand out for you?
I think classes really solidified early on two very important things. One is the attitude of mentorship that exists within the Calgary Police Service. The class sergeants that I have are people that I still have very strong relationships with today. And when I eventually became a class sergeant, I aspired to be like that. I saw the influence that you could have over a group of 24 very impressionable new recruits, and I wanted to be a part of kind of that positive mentorship. And the other is the relationships that you form with your classmates, right? When you are exposed, and classes pale in comparison to the adversity you sometimes face in policing. But at the time when you don't know any different, everything seems like a big deal. And forming those friendships, those long-lasting relationships, ones that I still carry forward to this day, is a very special thing. And it's interesting you talk about the fitness award in classes. I was always very athletic growing up, loved playing different sports, but really didn't have a ton of formalized coaching, right? Mm-hmm. Our coaches in Brooks, Alberta were passionate volunteer coaches, many of whom are mentors or were mentors of mine that I'm very thankful for. I had a father who was on the rigs a lot growing up in oil and gas, and so I relied on positive role models from places like my volunteer coaches. And it wasn't until I started to meet our physical training instructors in classes that I feel like my passion for fitness and my knowledge of fitness really kind of jumped to the next level. People like Paul Robertson and Tita Fransky and Lindsay Gertzmar and people who had grown up in that environment and were professionally developed in that environment. And they pushed us, especially people that are passionate about it, to find kind of their next gear and their next level. And that transitioned me into adventure racing and ultramarathons and different versions of the beep test that we keep coming up with to try to make it more, I guess enjoyable is not the right word, more different,
painful, more disgusting,
We call it type. It's type 2 fun. It's fun when it's over, right? And so it was very much, and then even some of my classmates like Murray Karakachuk and Amy Mitchell and Chris Hammer, who was a strength and conditioning coach beforehand. Like those are people who became my people, and they were the ones that I was able to pick information from and to kind of really try and better myself to reach the point that I'm at to now I get to give exercises to other people.
Yeah, like myself.
Like you.
Right? I think we're so fortunate here. Sorry, Bian.
That's all right, buddy.
I think we're so fortunate here, like our fitness unit, like they walk the talk. You know, so they're often underutilized, but they are so good at what they do. Whether it's recruit classes or the many recruiting programs that we have, I think I've learned a ton from them also. Like I think they're such a great and important unit for us for sure. So that's awesome to give them a shout out too.
I just want to bring up one of your other workouts that I've had the joy of participating in, and it involves a deck of cards, and it involves only burpees. But the thing about you is that, yes, it's only burpees, very challenging, very difficult.
Very gross.
There are 2 breaks built in to your workout, which are the jokers.
Delightful.
Yes, yeah. and the fact of the matter is that you don't even have one kind of burpee. You have more difficult burpees to do, you know, broad jump burpees and star burpees, and then the regular ones become, you know,
the break.
The actual break. Yeah. But the feeling of accomplishment when you're done, despite all the rashes and the dying and the camaraderie, it's amazing what you put together. I just would like to ask you, can you describe to us the day that you received your badge and talk to us about your first deployment to 2 District?
You know what, I vividly remember my graduation still, and it's been really neat now having been a member of the Honor Guard for 15 years. I think I've been a part of 40 recruit graduations now.
Wow.
Internally, and then a number of ones externally. And still the one I am most fond of is obviously the one I got to march out on that parade square, which is ironic. I got out of step marching, for the record, as someone who's the RSM. I hate to admit that. So to my never-ending shame. Yeah, I know.
I gotta get that video.
But I remember going up to get my badge from Chief Beaton. I remember watching and seeing all the families there. I remember my family there. Mm-hmm. I remember getting the Rob Vanderbilt Award from Art Vanderbilt, who's Rob Vanderbilt's father, who's a retired staff sergeant. And I remember how special that felt to get it from the father of a fallen member. And my first deployment in 2 District, I got deployed to Zone 2-3. I was working for Sergeant Christy Rahul, and my very first partner was a constable by the name of Dan Smith. So Dan, you would remember
He's
Dan.
Gone now.
He's back to the RCMP, and speaking of being back home, deployed back out east, which is what he always had an interest in. And him and I actually still stay in contact occasionally. So one of my first shifts, so one of my very first sets. Working in District 2, he and I pulled up to a suspicious vehicle in Bankview that was parked around the corner from a convenience store. And keep in mind, I have less than 48 hours on the job.
27th Ave.
Yeah. And there was an occupant inside looking suspicious. You run the plate and it was stolen, and he really had nowhere to go. Like, we were on him too quickly. I suppose he could have put it in drive and floored it, but we arrested him, and he kept alleging that, no, this is his friend's car. It was his friend's car. He's just in the convenience store around the corner. And so I walked around the corner, and 2 offenders were leaving the store. One had a handgun, and the other had 2 garbage bags full of cigarettes.
Well, now, opportunity strikes.
48 hours on the job.
And we all 3 stopped. And 0 people in that interaction knew what to do. I was like, oh no, I know this is wrong.
I should be doing something.
And I was like, I need an adult, like immediately. Help! And so they dropped the garbage bags. They just robbed the clerk. The clerk was actually injured inside the store. They had pistol whipped him, and off they ran into the community. And then, of course, like your chase drive kicks in, and I was like, yeah, well, time to chase after these people with a firearm, right? Yeah. So they hopped a few fences. They ended up disappearing into a yard and hunkering down, and then I also hunkered down. At this point, I was like, oh yeah, right. They gave us a gun.
I have one too.
I also have a firearm. Fantastic. And then, of course, units are asking where I am, and I was like, yeah, I'm under the sun.
I'm directly under the earth.
Now, like, yeah, there are several trees in my immediate vicinity and multiple houses, right? And of course, I'm in an alley. And so thankfully, they were just in the yard over. We were able to successfully set up containment and apprehend them, and thus kept my perfect foot chase streak alive, which is something I very proudly have throughout my career.
Oh my gosh, that's an awesome streak.
But yeah, that was my very first set in District 2, which led to lots of debriefing after that and lots of good learning moments about what's expected. And of course, like my initial exposure to policing in small town Alberta, we did not see calls of that significance.
Armed robbery with...
In fact, my second day on the job was 8 cows loose on the number 1 highway.
Whoa, that's a big call.
Not garbage bags of cigarettes and a firearm. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So then after 2 district, you moved to 4 district, and you were on the mountain bike team for a significant period of time.
I was, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the mountain bikes and what you enjoyed about that.
Policing on a bike is one of my favorite things to do, and
Agreed.
it's amazing on a number of different levels. One, you have a level of covertness, which is an ironic statement to say when you're in a uniform, but people are not expecting you to roll up on them
Totally.
in the capacity of riding a bike. And so you get into the alleys and the parks and the hills and the encampments and the tunnels and everything else, which is where a lot of criminal behavior is occurring. And so that ends up being a really fascinating way to police, right? Because it's a standard, like if there's a priority response to a call on a patrol car, if you were to stand there and listen, all you'd hear is like, and right? And worst case scenario on a bike, it's like, bring, bring, right?
I wish we had
and nobody's like, I bet that's the cops. And the other is you are so much more approachable to the community, right? Kids, adults, longtime Calgarians, new Canadians, doesn't matter what it is. People, there's something disarming about being on a bicycle, right? Maybe it's a level of dorkiness. Maybe it's the fact that my bike shorts are not long enough for how long my legs are. Whatever the case happens to be, yeah.
Short shorts.
It's just so neat to
Reno 911.
right, yeah, that's a reference frequently made. It's so neat to watch people like come up and ask you questions about your bike, being willing to engage. And if you'd have driven by in a car, you would have completely missed that opportunity.
Totally.
Our District 1 mountain bike team, this was a tradition that started probably 10 years ago. They started putting novelty bells or horns on their handlebars, a dinosaur, a brontosaur, a turtle,
I've seen them.
a shark, right? And the number of people, young and old, that will walk up and ask to toot their horn is amazing. Right, and it's one more way to kind of
That gained in popularity. I know downtown, and of course this is long after you left the bikes. But downtown, that gained popularity, and all the teams, every single one of them had them.
And it carries on, and rightfully so. It carries on this day. Such a minor gesture to humanize what the uniform is, right? And so like everyone's balaclavaed up in the winter, goggles on, right? You look to some super intimidating, and then people look down and see
a ladybug.
A ladybug, right? And it's like all of the apprehension about what the police might be just seems to melt away.
Oh, that's actually a human being under there.
Yeah.
Do you have a great story about stopping somebody that wasn't wearing a seatbelt? Yeah. And it just speaks to that whole covert style of policing when you're on a mountain bike, and when people are looking for police cars. I don't see all the other stuff that's going around.
Yeah, my partner, Eugene LaGrange, who's no longer with CPS, we were in the 19th Ave area in Forest Lawn and just stopped on a sidewalk on our bikes, and a Jeep Grand Cherokee with its windows down rolled by, a single male occupant, and I noticed that he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and through the window I said, hey, not wearing a seatbelt, pull over. And for whatever reason, he did.
What?
Yeah. And as I walked up to the vehicle, he had a ton of cash in his lap. And I don't mean like well organized, like it was loose. He had clearly been counting it. There was the overwhelming like herbaceous smell of fresh marijuana. Back then it was still illegal. And so we pulled him out of the vehicle, and as he got out, literally like dozens of different denominations of bills, drugs, everything was literally falling onto the roadway. And he was more concerned about picking it up than he was about the fact that now the police have discovered that he is in possession of all these things. And so it was tens of thousands of dollars in drugs that we seized off of something as simple as a no seatbelt ticket on a traffic stop.
And it probably wouldn't have happened if you were in a marked car. Like being on the bike was a big benefit.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't looking for police officers on a corner wearing short shorts on a bicycle.
Yeah. Amazing.
You described that area as a target-rich environment, and that as a result of some of your operations working with various different operational teams within the CPS, that you had the opportunity to see some vehicles too, as offense-related property. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure, yeah. We used to do what are called vice stings. Obviously, the laws around prostitution have changed somewhat over time, so keep in mind this is
well dated,
pre-2010. But when you were arresting Johns for soliciting prostitution, you were often seizing their vehicles, and then that went to a hearing, and the courts would decide whether that should be forfeited and the funds should be given back to victims of crime or not. And so On several occasions, we seized vehicles that were in the excess of $100,000. One was like a brand new Kenworth.
Wow.
It was a trucker, not his truck that he had chosen to participate in this illegal activity with, and then it was an unfortunate phone call to his boss to let him know that it was going to be seized and not making any money for a period of time and could potentially be forfeited. And so we talked in our pre-meeting, it almost seems hilarious, but it's not. In those circumstances, a lot of times, you were calling the registered owner of those vehicles and it would be somebody's wife or somebody's parent, and you have to be explaining why their vehicle's getting seized for a period of time, which are awkward conversations. They probably pale in comparison to how awkward the conversation is when that person ends up getting home at the end of the day, but that's part of the risk and part of the consequences of engaging in criminal behavior.
Totally. So after you were on the bikes, is that when you went to recruiting?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in that because obviously BM and I are in recruiting outreach, and you were selected because of the work you've done and all that sort of stuff to be sort of the face of the CPS. So I'm curious if you see any similarities between recruiting, because that was it back in 2009, 2010, you were in recruiting, right?
2010 and 2012, yeah.
Right, so I'm curious to know what advice you would give us who are in that position now. Do you see any differences, any similarities? Like what's the difference in recruiting between that time and 15 years later?
That was certainly a simpler time, right? The landscape of policing has changed a bit. You are now dealing with some of the negative societal challenges that have existed post kind of May 2021. And the increased scrutiny on police actions. All of that said, many of the same things that we valued and advocated for when I was recruiting in 2010 still very much exist today, right?
Sure.
We want a police service that's representative of the diverse population that we serve. We want to make sure that we're breaking down barriers to communities that might not have traditionally considered policing as an avenue. We want to make sure that everybody who puts their name in the hat has a fair shake. The thing that you are doing that's better than what we did back 12, 14 years ago is that you have a better understanding of what it really means to build trust and confidence in communities, right? Mm-hmm. When I was in recruiting, people would say, you know what, we need to hire more from diverse communities. And it was like, well, perfect. We'll just stop by the South Sudanese Community Association and we'll drop a big old stack of applications off and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And
see you later.
Like, hey, great news. You're going to love it, right? Policing is awesome. But of course, many of the members of that community come from a place either as a first and or a second generation Canadian who have intent distrust of police for very good reason.
For sure.
And so this isn't about just randomly tossing out some applications and hoping for the best.
We call it parachute recruiting.
Yeah.
You don't just go in and say, hey, join us, see you later.
Right, those are the career fairs, right?
Yes.
Hey, where you're at Mount Royal and there's already 200 kids there that want to be police officers, or where you're at a emergency services specific career fair. When you're going and actually actively recruiting, it's not about dropping off applications. It's about 5 steps before that, right? It's about building trust and confidence. It's about building relationships. It's about proving to them the things that they value is also what the police value. Yes. And it might not be those people who put in an application, but they might encourage a family member or a friend, or it might come up for discussion, or they might at least support somebody they know going through that. That's how you make change, right? Yeah. And I've watched the two of you and the recruiting unit really kind of embrace that concept, right? Where this is about building trust. This is about establishing relationships, and eventually, as a long-term investment, the return will be applications.
Yeah.
But the challenge to that is it's not cheap, it's not quick, and it's not easy, right? It's 100%. Only simple. It's simple, right? It's simple to say, hey, we need to meet with people and prove to them who we are, who we say we are, but it's not any of those other 3 things. And so kudos to the two of you and for your unit for continuing to understand and embrace that mindset.
One thing that Ange does really well when it comes to that, there's a lot of really neat ideas that we've sort of incorporated and put into practice this last couple of years. But at the end of the day, as good as an idea is, we've both recognized the importance that people matter, and to have actual authentic conversations and build things with that idea in mind. It's important to us that we get the very best talent possible to augment our members on the street, while at the same time giving everybody an equal opportunity to find the best version of themselves, which they can then share with the people of Calgary. Do you know what I mean? And
I've watched you do, and when you talk about authentic conversations are also not easy, right? No. I run with a recruiter that we have participated in many times together. I have watched you have difficult conversations with people, right? Anybody has the potential to be a police officer as long as they fit within, of course, the recruiting standards.
Yeah.
But some people have not prepared themselves enough to be competitive, right? And to tell them, hey, just keep doing what you're doing or you're going to be great, when in reality, we know that their likelihood of success is very low, is doing everybody a disservice, right? And I think of there's a few people that showed up in the early days of Run With a Recruiter who were physically ill after the warm-up.
Yeah.
And you didn't say to them, hey, you know what? Yeah, keep putting that application in, and maybe you'll luck out and get a 7 on the Leger. It's going to be awesome, right? Like you sat them down and said, listen, like here is what the expectation is. Here's how I think you can get there, and then we can provide those people the tools to be successful, right? We can help get them there. There used to be a period of time earlier in our careers where if you wanted policing, you better show up with all of the tools in the toolkit, right? And any suggestion that would provide an applicant a leg up, prep on the BDI interview, anything like that was seen as like, no, they should be doing all those things on their own. And it's like, well, sometimes people don't even know where to go get those tools, right? And so actually when I was in recruiting, that was one of the things I saw, is that we were watching lots of really good applicants get deferred at the BDI interviewing stage, not because they didn't have good examples, but because they were just terrible.
I think that was me.
So bad at interviewing, right?
Yeah.
And then when we built a one-day course to offer in there. And then when I got back to patrol in 2012, which was my next move to North District, I saw so many police officers miss out on promotional opportunities or lateral competitions, not because they didn't have good examples, because they probably just squeaked through on their panel interview, and they also sucked at interviewing, right?
Yeah.
And so we transitioned that BDI course into being for members pursuing lateral competition and promotion, and it ran for 12 and a half years until the promotion interview format changed a little bit, and now we are revamping it to be more kind of cover letter specific and example drafting specific. But like, we can't tell people who have no experience and who don't know where to go to get the experience, hey, this is on you to figure out, right? Sometimes organizationally, we have to bring the right people forward to help raise them up to be successful.
Just got to do it better.
Yeah, and I think on those lines of like raising people up and having those difficult conversations, I really love your take on leadership and the steps that you've taken to become a leader. So like, tell us a little bit about your steps and maybe when you weren't successful at becoming a leader and like a formalized leader, and how that sort of transitioned to how you're excuse me, how you're a current leader now and how you lead your district.
Sure. Early in my career, I had aspirations for something that wasn't formalized leadership. Like many new constables, the TAC team was a great appeal to me. And it was actually my journey in recruiting that led me to become passionate about leadership. I got some formal and some informal leadership opportunities through that and the public safety unit, which I'm still actively a part of. And I really kind of fell in love with helping people achieve their goals. That it always, and it really is the same thing that draws me to volunteer coaching, right?
Yeah.
I'll volunteer anywhere, but helping people get there, and athletics is a wonderful vessel in which to accomplish that, is something that I'm really passionate about. And so in that kind of recruiting window, I started to transition myself into a formalized leadership role and then pursuing that. And the story that you're talking about some of the pitfalls that I've had, when I thought I was ready for promotion to sergeant, I went to my then staff sergeant and proudly announced that was my intention. And that staff sergeant looked me flat in the face and said, yeah, no, that's not happening. And it wasn't as though they were doing it maliciously. They had valid reasons. They were concerned about my level of experience. They wanted to see more from me in the district that would prove that I was ready for the next level of leadership. And as difficult as that conversation was for me to hear, like, I vividly remember how much I appreciated that person having that difficult conversation, being willing to tell somebody no about something that they wanted, and then to follow up with a comprehensive plan of how to develop to be better. And then lo and behold, I was put in an acting capacity and successful the following year, right? And so I have strong beliefs about styles of leadership. I consider myself a servant leader. That is where I ground a lot of my principles out of. But I too have taken the privilege of leadership that I have in this organization and had those difficult conversations with other people to make sure that they understand realistic expectations and then finding ways to support and develop them going forward and to help them achieve their goals. Because as an athlete yourself, you would say, hey, there's nothing better than scoring a game-winning try in in a rugby match until you coach somebody else
Yeah.
to score that game-winning try.
100%.
And then all of a sudden, that's like the jump from constable to sergeant. And then you coach a coach who coaches somebody to score a game-winning try. And now that's where I kind of find myself at in my leadership journey at the staff sergeant rank, is now I am mentoring other sergeants who are impacting constables. And the patrol sergeant rank, we all, I think, can collectively agree, is the most influential rank
100%.
in the organization.
Most important,
right?
yeah.
When I arrived in District 5, that was one thing that was very important to me, is making sure that the team of sergeants that I'm privileged enough to serve and lead had a clear expectation in relation to how I could support them, what the goalposts were, what the district was asking of them, what we want our officers to focus on to build competent, successful police officers, focusing on the 4 cornerstones: community engagement, calls for service, proper investigations, traffic safety and education. And by giving everybody a goal to shoot towards, if they're always willing to row the boat, but if they don't know where the boat's heading, it becomes a real challenge, right? And so I have always believed very much in giving a direction for that boat to be rowed towards.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you want to talk about RTOC or go right into RSM?
You know what? I'd like to hear about RTOC a little bit. I know you got 2 stories. One's kind of funny, involves a Speedo. So, so let's talk about the Speedo. But the other one, and you can decide in which order that you want to share this, but the other one that you very well articulated was that where you have SMEs or subject matter experts at your disposal, and they're articulating something to you in a risk assessment, say to go ahead and execute a search warrant, your philosophy on that.
Sure. Actually, in between our initial conversation and today, I have a third story.
Bring it.
Is funny. So perhaps I'll go funny,
choose,
serious,
brother.
funny. We'll sandwich the seriousness in the middle. So the Real-Time Operations Center, I went up there as an acting staff sergeant in August of 2018 after I finished a kind of 2-month stint on the International Association of Women Police Planning Committee. And so I ended up there with a team of 8 women and myself.
Okay, paint the picture. Go on.
And these are people that I think the absolute world of. I still have friendships with them. The inspector is now Executive Director Melanie Onsescu. And the old style setup in the RTOC was that everything was kind of pod-based. You had 4 people all looking inwards at each other, and then large computer screens up along the wall. So I showed up on day 1, excited, prim and proper, ready to roll. And I was emailing back and forth with a colleague about going swimming with our kids on days off. And he had made a comment to say, "Hey, bring your Speedo." And so I was like, "Well, watch this. I'm gonna send him a picture of a Speedo and say this is what I'm gonna wear." And so I Googled "man in Speedo"
Mesh.
and as a mesh, and as I'm looking at the screen, and keep in mind, nobody is actually behind me at this point. They're all in front of me in their pods. Somebody says, "Whoa, who's shopping for Speedos?" And I look up, and my screen is being mirrored on one of the 70-inch screens that is in the RTOC. And so on day 1, I had to articulate to all of these people why, in fact, I was doing that, and to swear up and down that I was not, in fact,
Backpedal.
purchasing Speedos. So it's become a long-standing joke that
You might get something in the internal mail from Santa this year there.
Yeah, fantastic. The Run with a Recruiter Speedo could definitely gain some traction. The serious one that you're talking about is really kind of why the RTOC exists. And the RTOC exists as a oversight of all of the operations that are existing in the city. You have a duty inspector, you have 3 duty staffs if you include the operational intelligence group. And it's making sure everything that's running is adhering to policies, procedures, appropriate levels of risk management. It's necessary, it's reasonable, it's appropriate. And oftentimes I tell people, you're not getting paid for what you're doing, you're getting paid for what you might have to do in those roles, right? You're getting paid to be oversight. And on one particular call, there was a firearms investigation. Members of, I think it was the FIT unit or FAD, I can't remember which, the Fugitive Apprehension Detail, they were wanting to apprehend a male and female who were wanted for firearms trafficking. They were believed to be in the house, they were believed to be armed, and because of that, the tactical team had become engaged in the execution of this warrant and ultimately their arrest. And traditional calls to have them leave the residence weren't successful. Phone calls in, no luck. LRAD, which is a sound amplification device, no luck. Going up utilizing, I don't know if we utilized the loudhailer from the helicopter, I can't recall, but eventually they're reaching a point where they're going to have to ram this door and either go in and get them or ram the door and then at least change the environment where they could drop in robotics or other things. And so they didn't want to send members up with just a shield for protection because of the risk of firearms. And so they asked if they could use explosive forced entry on the door. And the tactical unit sergeant spent a few seconds articulating to me why that was necessary, and then I kind of cut him off and said, "Yeah, that sounds great. That's approved, right?" I ended up having to go through my duty inspector as well at that point because that requires a certain level of authorization. But that person was like, "Wow, I actually had a whole speech planned to try to convince you," and it was like, "Listen, like." Our job in the RTOC is to take all of the subject matter experts that exist and make informed decisions based on their recommendations. In fact, if I, with my very minuscule scope and understanding of explosive forced entry, am making critical decisions without consulting with people like our tactical unit members that are experts, then really I am negligent.
Totally.
Right? And so the kind of humorous twist of this story is they end up successfully executing the explosive forced entry on the door, which does convince these two offenders inside that we are serious and we are not going away. And so they walk out together with their hands up and they walk down the sidewalk and then they both look at each other and then they start passionately making out because they know that they are
not going to see each other.
They're not going to see each other for a while, and so they got one.
I can just imagine all the guys
goodbye
with,
kiss.
what's happening?
It's actually a very awkward arrest to make when someone is like passionately embracing another human. So,
oh, that's so good. I love it. I love it.
And the last one we were actually just talking about the other day, and it speaks to the reason why you don't do drugs. Is that we received a call of a male in medical distress who had looked out his third floor apartment balcony and saw someone stealing his truck. And so rather than taking the conventional stairs or elevator, he ran to his hall closet, grabbed a umbrella, and full Mary Poppins it off to the third floor balcony. And brace yourselves, thank goodness you're sitting down for this tidbit of information. It actually does not work.
What?
And he hit the ground like a meteor and caused significant damage. Here is the most interesting part. He actually does not own a truck.
Oh.
And he hallucinated the whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
Drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad, right?
Drugs are bad.
But
Kids,
in the
don't do
RTOC,
drugs.
you get notified of every call that's happening in the city of any significance. And so you see calls on a very regular basis that would just blow your mind.
I find it so interesting in my years being on the job, and now that you get it, and of course Ange understands it as well, some of the calls that we attend, stuff like what you just said, you can't make up.
No.
You can't make that stuff up.
No.
I did want to talk a little bit about your time as a Regimental Sergeant Major, or RSM. I think we've said that acronym a few times today. So, and I think you made a big difference there, and you talked about the values that you had as an RSM. So could you maybe break down a little bit about what that job is and sort of what you put in and what you got out of that role?
Sure. And for people's awareness, the Regimental Sergeant Major looks after dress drill, deportment, ceremony, tradition, honor guard, pipe band, funeral coordinators, things like that within the organization. Every major police agency in Canada has one. Almost every even smaller police agency has one, even on a part-time basis. And so really, the RSM functions with the principle that while our conduct is the most important representation of professionalism, it is our deportment as well that is also a big part of how the public views us. And so the RSM handles clothing and equipment, it teaches drill, runs ceremonies, everything like that. So my philosophy as the RSM, you touch a whole bunch of people in the organization, not literally, figuratively, you touch lots of people, but you have lots of responsibility, but not a lot of people reporting to you. Because if anybody needs anything in relation to authorization of kit, or there's a line of duty funeral, or whatever the case happens to be, you end up being the person to deal with all of that. And very early on, I saw it as an opportunity to say yes whenever I could to help support members, right?
Yeah.
If someone's reaching out to you for a different pair of boots because they have sore feet, or they've dropped or gained some weight and their uniforms don't fit anymore, or it's torn and they don't think it looks very professional, for you to just for you, when they send you that email, give you that phone call asking for authorization for new stuff, when you have an opportunity to say yes or to find a solution for them, or they're experiencing chronic pain from wearing 33 pounds of gear for 20 years, when you can implement a new duty belt program, when you can partner with OH&S to provide them the necessary kit that they need so they can stay active in operational patrol where they're really passionate, those are the things that end up making not a big difference, right? I always call it the 1% rule, right? You're looking to change somebody's life 1% at a time. And
I like that.
Nobody wears this at home for comfortable loungewear, right? Nobody gets home and is like, you know what, time to kick off and watch the hockey game. I think I'll put on my duty belt, click, feel how it rubs on my hips. Like that's never been said in the history of time. And so this isn't about making people like 100% comfortable. This is about making people as comfortable as they can be given the circumstance, right? We've all done our stampede shifts down on the grounds. We've all walked for 12 hours on hot pavement wearing a Stetson and taken 700 photographs with tourists that are in town. There is no level of kit outside of the CPS issued board shorts and no duty belt that will make that a comfortable day, but we can make that as comfortable as possible by investing some effort in R&D, finding better products, finding ways to say yes to people. Of course, not to the outlandish requests that you sometimes receive, but from a clothing equipment kit perspective, it's about trying to say yes. It's about trying to make sure that people have all the tools, sometimes literally and figuratively, that they need to be successful, because this job is about getting comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes, but not unnecessarily, right? I remember one recruit actually, he's a very athletically kind of wiry build, and he came forward and said, geez, I'm actually experiencing quite a bit of discomfort on my hips. And he said, here, I've taken some photos, and he showed me a photo. His right hip, from where the holster was just digging in, just because of his build, it's not a common thing, but his hip was black and blue. And he just thought this was like, well, this is what I deal with now as a police officer, right? This is it for me. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it was a $2.19 shank spacer that completely alleviated his problem, right? And so it was about trying to explore those different options. It's about like, the public doesn't care whether you're wearing Danner boots or Hayek's boots or SWAT boots or Under Armour boots, right? But if you have a foot that's shaped like a canoe paddle, then like we're going to get you a pair of black boots, right? But we're going to get you a pair that actually lets you walk down the road and not be in agony at the end of your shift. So that was kind of principle one. Principle two talked about building comfort around the ceremony and drill environment, right? When people think of like the RSM yelling commands at them on the parade square, they're thinking of all the movies that you've watched where a drill sergeant is screaming in your face. And to some degree, that was a part of our policing history as well in this country. But in my opinion, many people who are not proficient in drill do not excel in those environments, right? I'm used to being yelled at. I love drill. I'm very passionate about it. My time in the Honor Guard has prepared me well for doing drill. I could do it in my sleep. And so if someone's yelling at me on the parade square, I'm not bothered. But if I'm not familiar with it, or if you're uncomfortable with it, being yelled at only adds to that anxiety. And you really watch people, both my own personal experience from recruit classes and things that I had seen throughout my policing career, where people were excited to be a part of the ceremony from its significance, from whether it's honoring a fallen member or celebrating a grad or whatever the case happens to be, but they were petrified to actually participate in it. And so they wouldn't engage, right? And so one of the things that I've really tried to do as an RSM, and in any instructing that I've done throughout the service, is to add some lightheartedness, some humor, some engagement, because in my opinion, if you're not laughing, you're not learning, right? Yeah. And there are times to switch it on, don't get me wrong. Like when we're on the parade square for real on grad day, like it isn't, we can't be laughing and joking and moving about. But when it's just us in that environment on the parade square at our gymnasium, and we're teaching drill, yes, we're teaching movements, and yes, we're teaching timings, and yes, we're teaching how you're going to behave on parades, but you're also teaching what you want leaders to look like in this organization. You're also teaching, skill sets and attitudes and expectations, and I'm able to pass on my beliefs of what I value in the organization in those moments, because they're in a position that they're willing to hear that, because we've established that relationship, right? And in the pre-meeting that we had, we talked about day one of recruit classes for me, and hearing from Inspector Richard Hines, now retired Inspector Richard Hines. Yeah. And he said something to me that I will never forget, and it is really kind of a career-changing moment in relation to how I conduct myself. He said, I want you to imagine that you are coming to my family's door, or your family's door, your loved one, right? Your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife, your mom, your dad, your grandma, grandpa, your children, whomever. I want you to imagine that when you're going to a call for service at a residence or a business or wherever it happens to be, that you are going to deal with that loved one, the person who's most important to you in your life. And how would you conduct yourself if you were going to see that person? That's how you should behave, right? That's what you should dress like. That's what you should act like. That's what your deportment should be like. That's what your level of investigation should be as thorough as if you were investigating it for the person who is the most important in your life. And that's a lesson that I try to pass on both in my time as a class sergeant and as the RSM, and really anytime someone will listen. Because if we could all conduct ourselves in that fashion, if we could behave and go to every call like we were serving the person we cared about the most, what a wonderful organization that we would have.
It's interesting you bring that up about Mr. Heinz. He was a staff sergeant when he came to 2 District at the time. This was before you joined us. And I had a similar experience with him. And he just spoke about the circle of influence and just putting your energies regarding what you can actually impact in the moment. And it's stuck with me for so many years. I've shared it with absolutely everybody else.
For sure.
I do know that in 5 District, you have been there as a constable, sergeant, a detective, a staff sergeant, and an inspector.
Acting inspector, yeah.
Acting inspector. That's a pretty amazing run in any one district. But you have a particular leadership style in that district. Did you want to speak to that shortly before we conclude things?
Sure. I mean, I guess my leadership style in 5 is the same as really anywhere else that I've been in my career. But I have learned through my almost 18 years of policing some fascinating things that it's often the little things that have an impact with people, right? Yeah. When I sat down with all of my sergeants and some members in the district when I first arrived and talked about what expectations they had of me, and I had some to share back with them as well. One of the things they really wanted to see was present leadership. That's what they asked for. But present leadership is an interesting phrase, right? It means not only being there, but it means really engaging yourself. It's quite fascinating, the number of people that told me how much they appreciated that I changed in the change room. Yeah. Right? The fact that I wore a uniform every day, the fact that I was in 0600 parade, the fact that I'm available in the evenings and on weekends when crisis happens, that I go and grab a patrol car sometimes and just go take calls, right? Those things end up really endearing people to you because you are showing your level of engagement. Now, like when I show up at these calls, I'm basically useless. Right? I showed up to
just making more work for someone else.
Really, that's what I'm doing. Is I'm going to make work for another police officer. Just a few weeks ago, it was busy. I could hear it on the radio. My radio is always on when I'm in my office, and so I went and grabbed my admin sergeant. And I said, "Hey, it's hopping out there, and the street is short. Let's go." So we hopped in a patrol car. Keeping in mind that between the two of us, we're like 0.7 of a capable police officer, and we ended up, like, the people that we're dealing with, when I get to these scenes, I'm like, I'll go get statements and I can do this. Yeah. But really, if we're coming to complex investigations, I'm out. The world has changed too much since the three of us were trying to run those successfully. And while driving back, we encountered a collision. And it's like, well, I actually said on the air, I need an adult here because, like, I didn't have any, I don't know how to use e-collision. I didn't have damage stickers. Like, we had just jumped in the car and gone. We didn't have collision statements. And so I did a very good job of directing traffic until the real police showed up. Yeah. And then we're like,
someone with 48 hours on is like, we'll show you how to do
staff.
This, Inspector.
We got this, right? But, like, people talk about how much they appreciate the small things like that, right? The small things to make their life more enjoyable. Ralph Eckenstead, who we would all know is a staff sergeant in District 2, and the best advice he gave me when I got promoted to staff sergeant was to make microwave changes wherever you go. And the phrase microwave changes refers to the fact that when he gets to districts, the first thing he does is go check to see if the microwave is clean or not.
Interesting.
Right? Wow. And that it's functioning. Yeah. And if it's not, the first thing he does is clean the microwave and get a new one. Because what gets used every day? Yeah. And regrettably, like in every office environment or every professional corporate environment, we use these things, but we don't have a ton of ownership to them. So oftentimes they fall to disrepair or they become messy or whatever the case happens to be. So he says, like, he knows that I love to make change. He knows that I love to accomplish tasks. And his advice to me was to go slower, not faster off the start. Like, if you see things that need to be changed, you gotta push that down, swallow it deep, because you're not there yet, right? Yeah. You haven't built relationships with people there to help get them excited about change, right? And so he says when he goes to new work areas, the first thing he does, like, is the district functioning? Do they have enough chairs in the parade room? Do they have a clean microwave? Is the fridge clean? Do they, is the equipment that they're using in good repair? How can he help in that fashion? And only then when you start to be present and give expectations and prove that you're walking the walk and talking the talk, then you can start to make change, right?
That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
I love it. I kind of want to end there. That was good.
Before we do, so no coffee, no alcohol, no pre-workout for your workouts. Give us something. Do you have anything that you've consumed on a night shift that you regret?
Not on a night shift. I have a tremendous sweet tooth that I have to perpetually repress. So
what's your thing? What's your sweet tooth?
Your cheat day.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Usually something with peanut butter in it.
Yeah, and that's probably on a cruise, because I do know that you go on a few cruises a year. I don't think you're actually on the boat. I think you're towing it, and your family's getting a deal, and that's great. So we're going to wrap it up, but before we do, me personally, I can't believe that I got to finally speak to Captain Canada at the same time sitting beside Canada's best.
Hey.
Did you know she's Canada's best?
I do.
And you are Captain Canada. So prior to today, as I was emailing you back and forth, I was trying to work on something that I wanted to have presented to you on behalf of the whole team. The whole team was in on it. So you're gonna have to bear with me. Close your eyes for a second, and we're just gonna keep them closed.
I hate closing my eyes. It makes me physically uncomfortable.
Yes, and I don't blame you. Okay, open your eyes. We got you something. Captain Canada has to have a shield, brah. Like, look at it. I searched high and low, and I'll tell you, I wasn't sure if I was going to get this one or a battle-ridden one, but I went with this one, and I want you to know that I have a ton of respect for you, as does Ange. The entire service does. You're a special human being, and I'll tell you right now, Captain Canada needs a shield. So over to you, brother.
You're a good man. I appreciate you.
Boss, thank you so much for being
for your time.
A part of this and for being on Called to Serve. You're such an interesting guy and have amazing stories. And you're, like Brennan said, we respect you so much. You're such a great leader. And thank you. Thank you for being here. It's amazing.
Thanks so much.
Best day yet, brother.
Best day ever.
Smash. Good job.
Thank you. Now we're going to just talk.
So we'll just keep talking and they'll fade to black. Dude.
I love it.
And it's like a shield.
It's like
it's
a
heavy.
full,
Yeah.
I'm going to wear this on patrol.
I love it.
Yes.
Like
you
you
imagine?
need it.
I've
Like
stopped you for
need
speeding.
it.
Hello.
So, Travis Juska.
Talk to me, Goose.
Once again, I feel like we just scratched the surface. Like, even just when we sort of cut at the end, he's like, oh yeah, and this app that I developed for CPS about domestic violence, like, he just has all of these things that he continues to contribute, not only like to the organization and to the citizens of Calgary, but to us as teammates and members of the CPS. Like, he organizes those Wednesday workouts, which are devastating and like awful and make you taste blood in your mouth.
And inspiring.
But they're inspiring, right? And it just promotes camaraderie and friendship and just a little bit of joy at 5:30 in the morning when you're hanging out doing multiple different variations of burpees. I love some of the things he talked about today, like the microwave change. Like what an like light bulb moment as a leader, like just make these 1% changes just to make people feel better. And obviously, I'm sure you're not surprised for me to say that I loved the rugby analogy, right? Like when you score a try, yeah, that feels awesome. But then when you teach someone else how to do it, it feels even better, right? And you get that like sense of accomplishment and the leadership and coaching. But then when you teach a coach how to coach that, like what a feeling, right? So
look at you.
I just love it. I think that guy.
I find often that he says stuff, and it's just through random conversations, and all of it is awesome. Like today, I felt like, because I'm a bit of a wrestling guy from back in the day, it was like a Ric Flair moment, meeting Ric Flair. I expected him to come in and go, woo-hoo-hoo,
no
just
way,
bring
prim
it.
and proper. That guy is all proper. He used to give me so much trouble when he was the RSM because I would have like little bits of flair on my uniform. Sometimes I'd be wearing too many things, and he'd be like, Tetley, get rid of the flair.
That actually brings up a good point. So I really, over time, as I've gotten to know him from the 2 district days till now, he's actually not changed a whole lot. His way of doing things has always been amazing. But I pay attention when people don't think that they're being watched. And I've seen him speak to recruits in the locker room. It's kind. Yeah. It's with purpose, and it's inspiring. It's really easy, to wag a finger or to make a person feel uncomfortable about whatever behavior it is that you want to change. Yeah. He is that guy all the time. And I know from the people that attend his weekly workshops, we're all inspired to be around him. But don't kid yourself. He will lose to nobody. I know. He will lose to nobody. He'll smile. He'll allow you to be in the rearview mirror. But that's as far as it goes.
He just set a record just a couple weeks ago with the stair challenge, like climbing the Calgary Tower stair challenge in full firefighter kit.
So that doesn't surprise me at all. It's just the kind of dude that he is. His leadership style is awesome. I'm a bit of...
You're a fangirl.
Totally.
You're a fangirl around Juska.
So the reason for that is, Ange, is that when we go through the job and we we should do things like this, or we should consider this when we're making these decisions. He thinks about all that stuff, and he puts the members and relationships first. Yeah. And that's what makes him different. I can't wait to see where his career goes. We're going to have him come back, because from our pre-meet, he had a whole bunch of other stories. He's totally got all these wild and crazy experiences, and I can't wait to share more of them in the future. He is Captain Canada, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't really need the shield, to be honest. But he is that guy to many people in the service. And I personally feel privileged that we got a chance to chat that fella up today.
And I want to end off with a mantra that he said right before the camera started rolling. No coffee, no mustaches, no donuts.
Negative Ghost Rider. The pattern is full.
Amazing.
Over and out. Good job today, Tetley.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
Even though you're angry, I wanted to.
I know I turned it on.